The prophecy of the third temple, in the heart of Jerusalem, where the rising sun touches the ancient stones with golden light, stands an empty space that carries the weight of millennia. There, where marble columns once rose and incense smoke rose to the heavens, only silence remains, a silence that echoes louder than any human proclamation. There are places on earth where time seems to fold in on itself, where past and future conspire in whispers that only a few can hear. The Temple Mount is one of those places. Its stones hold memories of glory and destruction, of divine encounters and human tragedies. And amid this palimpsest of sacred history, one promise hangs in the air like morning mist, the promise of a third temple. Two temples have already stood on that sacred ground. The first, built by King Solomon in times of splendor, housed the Ark of the Covenant and witnessed the manifest presence of the divine. The second, rebuilt after the Babylonian exile and expanded by Herod the Great, followed the footsteps of prophets and teachers until the Roman legions reduced it to rubble in the year 70 of the Common Era. Since then, entire generations have been born, lived and left under the shadow of this absence. But there are those who look to the future and see not a void, but a promise about to be fulfilled. Ancient texts speak of a final reconstruction, of a temple that will mark the last days of human history. Scriptural scholars, archaeologists, theologians and mystics pore over parchment and prophecy, searching for signs, dates, conditions. Some prepare ritual instruments of gold and silver, others study priestly lineages lost to time, and there are those who observe world events as if deciphering an ancient code. The narrative that awaits us is full of intertwined symbols and mysteries. It speaks of faith and power, of hope and conflict, of human dreams and divine will. It is a story that spans 3 millennia, connecting ancient kings to modern movements, prophecies to politics, the sacred to the earthly. And at the center of this complex web is a question that resonates through the centuries. When and if will the third temple be erected? What will it mean for humanity? The journey we begin now will take us through corridors of time, where each stone removed reveals a new layer of meaning. We will walk on sacred ground, not only in a literal sense, but also metaphorically, because touching this theme is touching ancient hopes, historical wounds, and eschatological expectations that define the worldview of millions. Get ready to explore not just a physical construction, but a symbol that transcends architecture. The third temple represents for some the final restoration of divine order. For others, it is a harbinger of unprecedented conflicts. And for many, it remains an enigma wrapped in coded prophecies and apocalyptic visions. If you feel the call to unravel the mysteries that connect the old with the next, sign up for this journey and stay with us as the shadows of the past illuminate the paths of the future. To understand the prophecy of the third temple, we must first trace the history of those who preceded it. A history that begins not with stone and mortar, but with a promise made under the desert stars. After the exodus from Egypt, during the pilgrimage through the Sinai desert, the Tabernacle was established, a mobile tent that served as a center of worship and a meeting point between the divine and the human. It was a provisional structure, suitable for a people on the move, but it already contained all the elements that would later define the temples: the atrium, the holy place, and the holiest of holies, where the Ark of the Covenant rested. Centuries passed. The tribes crossed the Jordan, conquered the Promised Land, and established a kingdom. It was King David who first dreamed of building a permanent house to house the divine presence. He gathered precious materials, planned the structure, but the construction task was reserved for his son. As it is written, "But the word of the Lord came to me, saying, You have shed abundant blood and made great wars. You will not build an house for my name." 1 Chronicles 22:8. It was up to Solomon, king of proverbial wisdom, to build the first temple. In the year 957 BC, after 7 years of meticulous construction, the building was consecrated. Cedars of Lebanon formed its beams. Pure gold lined its inner walls. Olive cherubs with wings that stretched from wall to wall guarded the most holy. Solomon's temple was not just a place of worship, it was a declaration of divine presence among men, a cosmic axis that connected heaven and earth. For 4 centuries, the first temple remained the center of spiritual and national life. But in 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian forces invaded Jerusalem. The temple was looted, desecrated, and finally being on fire. Their treasures were taken as spoils of war. The Ark of the Covenant disappeared in that cataclysm, and its whereabouts remain one of history's great mysteries. 70 years of exile followed. The people lived on the banks of foreign rivers, remembering Zion with tears. But the prophets had spoken of return, and this promise began to be fulfilled when the Persian king Cyrus issued a decree allowing the exiles to return and rebuild the temple. The second temple was opened in 516 BC. It was more modest than its predecessor. Elders who had seen the first temple wept when they saw the new structure, for it did not compare in glory to the one that had been destroyed. But this second temple would play a crucial role in the spiritual history of humanity. Centuries later, Herod the Great undertook a massive expansion, transforming it into one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. It was in this second temple that events of eternal significance unfolded. There, according to tradition, a 12-year-old boy amazed the masters with his understanding. There, tables of money changers were overturned in an act of prophetic indignation. There, veils were torn at the moment of sacrificial death. But in the 70s of the Common Era, history repeated itself with dark echoes of the past. The Roman legions, commanded by Titus, besieged Jerusalem. After months of brutal siege, the walls were breached. The temple, according to historical accounts, was burned down, some say against the orders of the Roman general who wanted to preserve it. The flames consumed centuries-old cedars. Molten gold flowed between the stones. Soldiers dismantled the structures, stone by stone, to recover the precious metal, unwittingly fulfilling an ancient prophecy about no stone left unturned. Since that fateful day, no third temple has been built. The space remains occupied by other sacred structures. And for almost 2,000 years, faith communities around the world have included the yearning for reconstruction in their prayers. Share your reflections on how the past shapes our future hopes. For in every ancient stone is a lesson for the times to come. The mystery surrounding the Third Temple lies not just in the matter of its physical construction, but in the layers of prophetic, political, and spiritual significance that surround it. It is an enigma that intertwines archaeology and eschatology, history and hope, the tangible and the transcendent. There are those who say that all the necessary elements are already being prepared. Reports mention the existence of organizations dedicated exclusively to rebuilding the temple. These entities, according to testimonies, have worked meticulously to create ritual instruments, menorahs of pure gold, incense altars, priestly vestments woven according to ancient specifications. Specialized artisans study ancient texts to ensure that every detail matches the original descriptions. Even more intriguing are the claims about the preparation of specific elements needed for temple rituals. Certain traditions require the ash of a flawless red heifer for ritual purification. There are reports from breeders who claim to have born animals that meet these extremely specific criteria, an occurrence considered rare enough to be seen as providential by those awaiting reconstruction. The training of priests also figures in this mystery. The priestly lineages, descending from Aaron through Zadok, were dispersed over the centuries. But some groups claim to have kept genealogical records that trace these lineages through generations. Schools have been established, reports say, where young men study the complex procedures of temple rituals, burnt offerings, grain offerings, blood sprinkling, practices that have not been performed for nearly 2 millennia. But the mystery deepens when we consider the location. The Temple Mount is not an empty space awaiting construction. It is one of the most disputed and politically sensitive places on the planet. Structures sacred to other religious traditions have occupied the space for centuries. Any move toward building the third temple would not just be an architectural undertaking. It would be an act with potentially cataclysmic geopolitical repercussions. Some scholars suggest alternative interpretations. There are those who say that the third temple could be built on an adjacent site, based on alternative readings of ancient measurements. Others propose that certain existing structures could be reconfigured or shared. And there are those who argue that the prophecies about the third temple should be understood in a spiritual or metaphorical sense rather than a literal one. The mystery also involves chronology. Prophetic texts associate the construction of the third temple with specific end-time events. Some interpret that the time it must exist during a period of 7 years, described in apocalyptic visions. Others suggest that its construction will mark the beginning of an era of messianic peace. Interpretations vary widely, and even among dedicated scholars there is little consensus on the exact sequence of events. Archaeological elements add more layers to the enigma. Excavations near the Temple Mount have revealed ancient tunnels, chambers, and structures. There are those who speculate about undisclosed discoveries, perhaps fragments of the first or second temple, perhaps even sacred artifacts hidden before the destruction. But full archaeological access to the site is impossible due to its religious and political sensitivity, leaving many questions unanswered. The mystery of the third temple is therefore multifaceted. It's at once a deeply rooted religious expectation, a seemingly insoluble political dilemma, an archaeological curiosity thwarted by access limitations, and a symbol of eschatological hopes that transcend the present. Like a puzzle whose pieces are scattered across millennia, continents, and interpretive traditions, it defies simple understanding. Follow this journey with us as we continue to explore the enigmas that connect ancient faith to future possibilities. The narrative of the Third Temple does not unfold in a vacuum. It is animated by figures that span the centuries, from ancient prophets to those who today dedicate their lives to the hope of reconstruction. In sacred texts, we find the first voices that spoke of this promise. The prophet Ezekiel, exiled to Babylon after the destruction of the first temple, received detailed visions of a future temple. In his writings, he describes precise measurements, specific chambers, restored rituals. His vision presents a building of grandiose proportions, with healing waters flowing from its foundations, an image that has fascinated interpreters for more than 2,500 years. Daniel, another visionary from the exile period, received revelations about time periods and future events. His enigmatic words about 70 weeks and a prince who will see sacrifices are often associated with the third temple. As it is written, "And he will make a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the middle of the week he will cause sacrifice and meat offering to cease." Daniel 9:27. This passage has generated countless interpretations about the role of the temple in the final events. Zechariah, prophesying at the time of the rebuilding of the second temple, looked beyond his own time. His visions include a purified high priest and a branch who will build the temple of the Lord. The complexity of his images, golden candelabras, stones with 7 eyes, horses of different colors, creates a rich prophetic tapestry that scholars are still trying to fully unravel. Advancing beyond the canonical texts, we find historical figures who attempted in some way to restore the temple. There are reports that, in the 4th century of the Common Era, the Roman Emperor Julian, known as the Apostate for having abandoned Christianity, tried to allow the reconstruction of the temple as a way of contesting Christian prophecies. According to the chronicles of the time, the project was abandoned after events that were interpreted as supernatural intervention, earthquakes, fireballs emerging from the foundations. Historians debate the veracity and interpretation of these reports to this day. In the modern era, personalities dedicated specifically to the cause of the Third Temple emerge. Scholarly rabbis dedicate decades to the study of Talmudic treatises that describe temple procedures in detail. Some say that architects have produced detailed plans based on ancient texts and archaeological discoveries. Religious activists organize movements, hold symbolic ceremonies, and work to keep the hope of reconstruction alive. Certain traditions also mention the wait for messianic figures who will play crucial roles. Some interpretations suggest that the construction of the Third Temple will be linked to the appearance of a prophesied leader, whether a descendant of the Davidic lineage or a priestly figure from the order of Melchizedek. Expectations vary across traditions, but the common element is the belief that reconstruction will not be merely human in initiative. There are also those who study the prophecies from a different perspective, seeing the Third Temple not as a sign of restoration, but of deception. Certain interpreters suggest that the construction of the temple will be part of turbulent events, where spiritual discernment will be essential to distinguish between authenticity and imitation. The characters in this narrative also include anonymous figures, the faithful who for centuries prayed facing Jerusalem, who kept the memory of the temple alive through liturgies and laments. There are countless jurors' actions that transmitted the hope of reconstruction from parents to children, preserving traditions and ritual knowledge even when the possibility of practical use seemed infinitely distant. And there are the archaeologists, historians, and scholars who, motivated by academic curiosity or religious fervor, dedicate entire careers to unraveling the mysteries of the Temple Mount. They work with fragments, shards of pottery, ancient coins, weathered inscriptions, trying to reconstruct not only the physical history of the site, but also understand its spiritual significance through the ages. If you want to continue exploring how ancient and modern voices intertwine in this ancient prophecy, stay with us as we uncover the next revelations. Beneath the surface of theological debates and architectural aspirations, the question of the Third Temple pulses with a deeper tension, a spiritual conflict that transcends politics and stone. This conflict manifests itself primarily in the very interpretation of what the temple represents. For some, it is the restoration of the divine order established since Sinai, a return to the ritual purity, the manifest presence, the sacrificial system that they believe should never have ceased. The temple, in this vision, is the key to the fulfillment of ancestral promises, the portal through which the divine will return to dwell among men in a visible and indisputable way. But other voices raise profound questions. There are those who say that the system of animal sacrifices was fulfilled and transcended, that the torn veil in the Second Temple marked not an accident, but an intentional transition. From this perspective, the construction of a third physical temple to resume ancient practices would be a spiritual step backwards, a refusal to recognize fundamental developments in the relationship between the human and the divine. The tension deepens when we consider the eschatological implications. Certain interpretations suggest that the Third Temple will be the scene of dark events, that its construction will not mark restoration, but desolation. There are prophetic texts that speak of sacrilege in the holy place, of a desolating abomination, of the forced cessation of sacrifices. In these readings, the temple becomes not a symbol of hope, but a setting for ultimate deception, where spiritual discernment will be tested to the extreme. This duality of interpretation creates a spiritual battlefield where scriptures are weapons and hermeneutics is strategy. Each cited text generates counter-citation. Every theological argument finds equally reasoned refutation. The conflict is not between faith and skepticism, but between faiths that look at the same prophecies and see radically different futures. There is also the dimension of divine timing versus human initiative. Some argue that rebuilding the temple must await supernatural intervention, that forcing its construction through political or military means would assume a role that does not belong to us. Certain traditions teach that the third temple will descend from the heavens fully formed, built by divine, not human hands. Trying to anticipate this event through human effort would, from this perspective, be a form of spiritual rebellion. Others counter that passive waiting is an abdication of responsibility. If there are promises of reconstruction, they reason, then there must also be a human role in its achievement. After all, both the first and second temples were built by human hands under divine guidance. Why would the third be different? Spiritual conflict also manifests itself in the simultaneous fear and hope that the theme evokes. For some, the rebuilding of the temple is the most precious promise, the sign that humanity's spiritual exile is coming to an end, that cosmic reconciliation is at hand. But for others, it evokes deep apprehension, the fear that artificial acceleration of apocalyptic prophecies could precipitate catastrophes that could be avoided or postponed. There is also the question of spiritual authority. Who has the right to decide when and how the temple should be rebuilt? Traditional religious leaders, modern governments, popular faith movements? The absence of consensus on authority creates a vacuum where multiple voices compete, each claiming legitimacy based on different readings of ancient texts. Within this spiritual conflict, tensions also emerge over the very concept of physical sacredness. The modern era has witnessed a movement in many spiritual traditions toward inwardness, the idea that the true temple is the human heart, that the acceptable sacrifice is a contrite spirit. In this context, the insistence on a physical temple may seem like a return to external forms of religiosity that humanity's spiritual development should have transcended. But defenders of the physical temple argue that matter and spirit are not opposites, that the physical can be a vehicle of spiritual, that there is genuine sanctity in places and objects when consecrated to the divine presence. The tension between these views, one that privileges the interior and symbolic, another that affirms the value of the exterior and concrete, cuts across many religious divides. Share your perspective on how we balance prophetic hope with present responsibility, for in this delicate balance lies a wisdom that transcends ages. The layers of revelation about the third temple extend through ancient scrolls, mystical texts, and oral traditions passed down through generations. Each source adds texture and nuance to the prophecy, creating a complex mosaic of expectations and symbols. The book of Ezekiel contains perhaps the most detailed description of a prophetic temple. During his exile in Babylon, the prophet was caught in a vision and taken to a high mountain, where a resplendent being with a bronze appearance showed him a temple with precise measurements. Entire chapters are devoted to dimensions of chambers, thickness of walls, arrangement of gates. The waters flowing from the temple gradually grow until they become a river that cannot be crossed, healing everything it passes through. Fruit trees grow along its banks, producing new fruit every month, and their leaves serve as medicine. This vision of Ezekiel presents characteristics that correspond to neither the first nor the second temple, leading generations of scholars to debate whether it describes a literal future temple, a spiritual reality, or a combination of both. The measurements are so specific that architects have tried to create plans based on them, but certain dimensions seem to defy conventional physics, perhaps suggesting symbolic meanings in addition to the literal. The prophet Zechariah adds layers of mystery with his night visions. He sees a man with a measuring line going to measure Jerusalem, but receives the message that the city will be inhabited as open villages due to the multitude of people and animals. As it is written, "And I will be unto her, saith the Lord, a wall of fire round about, and I will be the glory in her midst." Zechariah 2:5. This promise of direct divine protection has been interpreted as relating to the Third Temple period. Apocalyptic texts add darker dimensions. There are passages that speak of measuring the temple of God, the altar and the worshippers, but excluding the outer court, because it was given to the Gentiles, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. This division between preserved sacred space and desecrated space suggests a period of conflict and partial occupation. In mystical literature, we find descriptions of a heavenly temple that serves as a model for the earthly one. Certain traditions teach that everything that exists on earth has a counterpart in heaven, and that the earthly temple is just a shadow of the true temple that exists in spiritual dimensions. Some texts suggest that the Third Temple will be a unique fusion of the heavenly and the earthly, where the barrier between the two will be thinner than ever before. Some say that ancient manuscripts, preserved in isolated communities, contain knowledge about the exact location of sacred objects hidden before the destruction of the Second Temple. Reports mention the Copper Scroll, a text found in the Dead Sea Caves, which supposedly lists locations of temple treasures. Although most scholars consider it folklore or symbolic code, some dedicated seekers spend lives trying to decipher its cryptic clues. Oral traditions preserved through centuries mention specific signs that preceded the construction of the Third Temple. Some speak of specific celestial alignments, of the convergence of unlikely political events, of archaeological discoveries that will remove seemingly insurmountable obstacles. These traditions vary between communities, but they share the belief that the timing will not be accidental. It will be orchestrated by hands other than human. Prophetic texts also speak of the temple in terms of broader restoration. Isaiah proclaims, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall be remembered no more, neither shall they remember." Isaiah 65:17. This promise of cosmic renewal has been connected by some interpreters to the era of the Third Temple, not just as a building, but as a symbol of a universal transformation. There are revelations about the restored priesthood. Ancient texts describe the necessary purification of priests, the consecration rituals, and specific clothing. But they also speak of a priesthood of a different order, eternal, not based on physical descent. This tension between restoration of the old and emergence of the new permeates many of the revelations about the Third Temple. Certain prophetic passages connect the temple to cosmic events, the darkening of the sun and moon, stars falling from the sky, celestial powers being shaken. These apocalyptic descriptions suggest that the period of the Third Temple will not be one of normality, but of fundamental transformation in the very structure of reality. Old revelations also include warnings. There are texts that warn against those who will claim to represent divine authority, but will lead many into error. The ability to perform signs and wonders, these passages warn, will not be sufficient proof of legitimacy. Deep spiritual discernment will be necessary to navigate the times associated with the Third Temple. Stay connected with us as we continue to unravel the layers of meaning that unite age-old revelations with possibilities that still await fulfillment. The vision of a Third Temple does not exist in isolation. It is intertwined with prophecies about the condition of the world in which it will be built. And these prophecies paint a panorama of collapse and transformation, where old certainties crumble and new paradigms emerge from the chaos. Prophetic texts describe a period preceding final events as a time of unprecedented trouble. Wars and rumors of wars echo across nations. Famines ravage entire regions. Earthquakes shake literal and metaphorical foundations. Pestilences sweep away populations. Some say we see these signs multiplying in our own era. Extreme weather events, global pandemics, conflicts that threaten uncontrolled escalation. The prophecy also speaks of moral and spiritual ruin, a cooling of love, multiplication of iniquity, human hearts failing through fear. Ancient traditions warn of a period where good will be called evil and evil good, where moral confusion will be so profound that only those anchored in eternal truths will be able to navigate it with clarity. Economically, certain prophetic visions suggest unprecedented systems of control. There are passages about brands needed to buy or sell, about centralization of economic power, about accumulated wealth that will not provide security. These symbols have been interpreted in countless ways over the centuries, but they maintain a special resonance in eras of digital technology and pervasive surveillance. The world in ruins also includes fragmentation of social structures. Prophecies speak of betrayal within families, of divisions between father and son, mother and daughter. This disintegration of fundamental bonds points to a period where traditional loyalties will be tested and where spiritual decisions may isolate individuals from their own communities. Politically, there are visions of emerging empires and coalescences of power that redraw geopolitical maps established centuries ago. Unlikely alliances form driven by common interests against perceived threats. Certain interpretations suggest that 10 kingdoms or regions of power will unify in some way, creating global governance structures without historical precedent. Ruin also manifests itself in the collapse of institutions that seemed permanent. There are those who say that established religious systems will face crises of credibility, that political structures that have lasted centuries will fragment, that scientific certainties will be challenged by inexplicable phenomena. This period of dissolution, the texts suggest, is necessary to prepare the ground for the new that will emerge. In the specific context of the Middle East, where the third temple would be built, the prophecies suggest intensified conflicts focusing precisely on Jerusalem. The city is described as a heavy stone for all nations, a cup of dizziness for the people around it. Its centrality in global disputes, far from diminishing, will increase until decisive events unfold there. There are also descriptions of celestial signs that will accompany this period of ruin: moon becoming like blood, sun darkening, stars seeming to fall. Some interpret these images literally, others see them as apocalyptic language for political and social upheaval. But the intended effect is clear: to convey a sense of the world turned upside down, where even the heavens seem to participate in the transformation. The ruins are not just physical or political. There is a dimension of spiritual desolation. Texts warn about false prophets multiplying, about deception so convincing that, if possible, they would deceive even the chosen. This proliferation of falsehood in the midst of the crisis will create an environment where truth becomes a rare commodity, where discernment is tested at every moment. But within this vision of ruin, there are also seeds of renewal. Certain traditions teach that the collapse of the old is a prerequisite for the birth of the new, that these convulsions, however painful they may be, are part of a birth process, humanity gestating a new era, and like all births, it involves intense pain before the emergence of new life. The construction of the third temple in this context becomes a powerful symbol. For some, it represents the first sentinel. There is restoration in the midst of chaos, a sign that even as much falls apart, something sacred is being established. For others, the temple amidst the ruins is more ambiguous, perhaps part of the very drama of desolation that precedes final transformation. There are those who observe the current world and recognize echoes of these ancient prophecies in it. the speed of technological change destabilizing work structures and society, the climate crisis threatening the foundations of civilization, political polarization fragmenting communities, pandemics revealing weaknesses in global systems. Was all this a prelude, or simply another phase in the cyclical history of humanity? The question remains open, but the ruined world prophecy serves as a lens through which many interpret contemporary events. And regardless of whether one believes in literal fulfillment, these ancient views continue to shape how millions perceive and respond to the crises of our era. If you feel the call to understand the signs of the times we live in, sign up for this journey and stay tuned as we explore the depths of what is to come. In the prophetic narrative surrounding the Third Temple, there is a dark thread that weaves through the ages, the rise of a deceptive force that will manifest with unprecedented power in the times associated with the final temple. Ancient texts speak of a figure who will emerge on the world stage with promises of peace and solutions to seemingly insoluble crises. This presence will not announce itself as evil. On the contrary, it will appear as a bearer of light, as a savior in desperate times. His rise to power will be marked by persuasive eloquence, by a seemingly supernatural ability to unify opposing factions, by charisma that will win over crowds. Certain traditions teach that this figure will confirm some type of agreement or alliance for a specific period of time, 7 years, according to some interpretations. And it will be precisely in this context that the Third Temple will find its construction window. The agreement will allow rituals to be restarted, the temple to be erected, and ancient practices to be restored. For many, this will seem like the fulfillment of ancient promises, but prophecies warn of a turnaround in the middle of this period. What began as permission will turn into desecration. The figure who facilitated the construction of the temple will enter the holy place and claim for himself worship due only to the divine. As it is written, so he will sit like God in the temple of God, wanting to appear like God. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. This act, called in some texts an abomination of desolation, will mark a transition from apparent peace to open persecution. The rise of darkness will not be limited to one individual. There is mention of an entire system of deception. False prophets will perform signs and wonders, causing fire to come down from heaven in the sight of men. There will be a fusion of political, religious, and even seemingly supernatural power, creating a structure of totalitarian control, disguised as enlightenment and progress. Certain interpretations suggest that technology will play a crucial role in this rise. The ability to monitor, track, and control entire populations through digital systems creates possibilities for dominance that ancient prophets may have glimpsed in visions, but lack the vocabulary to describe literally. The mark required for economic transactions, mentioned in apocalyptic texts, resonates disquietingly with contemporary developments in biometric identification and digital currency. The spiritual dimension of this ascension is equally troubling in the prophecies. This is not just political or economic tyranny, but an attempted usurpation of spiritual loyalty. The claim to divinity, the demand for worship, the persecution of those who refuse, all this points to a conflict that transcends the material and touches the eternal. There are also warnings about the role of compromised religious leaders who will legitimize this dark rise. One figure is described in terms of a false prophet who performs wonders in the name of the first figure, persuading inhabitants of the land to erect an image that, in some accounts, will even appear to come to life and speak. This fusion of religious authority with political power creates a sophisticated spiritual trap. The rising darkness will not only manifest itself in major political events, but will permeate culture, thought, and values. There are prophecies about the multiplication of wickedness so that the love of many will grow cold. A gradual inversion of moral values, where good and evil swap places in collective perceptions, will create confusion that leaves even well-intentioned people vulnerable to deception. In the context of the specific temple, some texts suggest that the cessation of sacrifices in the middle of the 7 years will mark the moment of full revelation. What was masked will be revealed. What seemed to be the way to go, staturation, will show your true nature. And those who placed hope in the physical temple and promises of the charismatic figure will face a devastating crisis of faith. But the prophecies also speak of protection for those who do not bow down. There are promises that even during the height of darkness, there will be a remnant preserved. Places of refuge will be provided. Inner fortitude will be granted to resist. The duration of the tribulation will be shortened because of the chosen ones. The rise of darkness, therefore, is not just about triumphant evil, but about ultimate testing. It is presented as the final refinement, where wheat will be separated from chaff, where true loyalties will be revealed, where each soul will have to choose who it will serve without the possibility of comfortable neutrality. Reflect and share. In times of increasing confusion, how do we cultivate discernment that allows us to recognize genuine light from shining fakes? Amid the rising darkness, the prophecies also speak of a resistance, not organized by conventional human means, but sustained by unshakable spiritual conviction and promises of divine protection. This resistance will not take the form of conventional armies or organized political movements. It will be composed, according to the texts, of those who maintain loyalty even under extreme cost. There are descriptions of 2 witnesses who will prophesy dressed in sackcloth for 1,260 days, symbolic numbers that permeate apocalyptic literature. These figures will have the power to bring plagues, close the skies, turn waters into blood, but they will also eventually be martyred, only to be resurrected after 3.5 days. The endurance of light also includes the preservation of knowledge and truth. While falsehood will multiply, there will be those dedicated to keeping the flame of authenticity alive. Manuscripts will be preserved in secret places. True teachings will be passed on in small, trusted circles. Oral tradition, which kept hopes alive during previous exiles, will once again serve as a vehicle for preservation. There are those who say that certain communities are already preparing themselves spiritually for this period. Not through paranoia or isolation, but through deepening authentic spiritual practices, cultivating discernment, forming networks of mutual support. These communities study the signs, but not with terror, with sober preparation and trust in ancient promises. The prophecies also mention supernatural phenomena that will accompany the resistance. Angels will be sent to seal servants of the divine on their foreheads, a spiritual mark invisible to human eyes, but which will guarantee protection in the midst of judgments that will come upon the earth. This sealing is presented as a counterpoint to the mark of the beast. While one mark represents submission to the dark system, the other represents divine ownership. Resistance will not be passive. There are descriptions of courageous proclamation of truth, even in the face of threats, of testimony kept until death, of refusal to bow down to images or accept brands that would compromise spiritual loyalty. This firmness, far from being fanatical, is presented as a clear awareness of what is at stake, not just temporal life, but eternal destiny. Texts also speak of prepared places of refuge. There is a powerful image of a woman, a symbol of a community of faith who receives eagle wings to fly into the desert, where she will be nourished for time, times, and half a time. Another symbolic language for a period of protection during tribulation. This refuge is not necessarily geographic in the conventional sense, but may represent spiritual protection that transcends physical location. Light resistance is also characterized by not fighting back with the opponent's weapons. There is a profound passage that says, "Here is the perseverance of the saints, of those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." Revelation 14:12. The strength of this resistance lies not in violence or coercion, but in integrity maintained under extreme pressure. There will also be a global proclamation of truth before the end. Texts mention that the gospel of the kingdom will be preached throughout the world as a testimony to all nations. Some interpret this literally as evangelization that will reach every ethnic group. Others see it as disseminating fundamental spiritual truths that will give everyone the opportunity for informed choice before final events. Resistance also includes the dimension of intercessory prayer. There are descriptions of the saints' prayers rising like incense before the divine throne, and these prayers playing a direct role in the unfolding of cosmic events. The connection between spiritual activity on earth and heavenly realities is presented as much more direct and consequential than many imagine. Prophecies also speak of mass repentance that will occur among certain communities. A veil will be o'ercome, scales will fall from the eyes, and there will be collective recognition of previously rejected truths. This spiritual awakening in the midst of tribulation will add strength to the resistance of the light. There are specific promises of protection, that not a hair of the faithful will be touched without permission, that even if there is physical martyrdom, spiritual victory is guaranteed, that the period of intense tribulation will be shortened because of the chosen ones, so that no one will perish. The resistance of light, therefore, is not desperate, but hopeful. It is not reactive, but based on eternal promises. It does not depend on human strength, but on spiritual resources that transcend physical circumstances. It is presented as humanity's final testimony before decisive divine intervention. Stay connected with us as we approach the climax of this prophetic narrative that unites heaven and earth, time and eternity. The narrative of the Third Temple reaches its climax not in the physical construction of the building, nor even in the desecration that will follow, but in the cataclysmic events that will mark the close of this era and the dawn of a transformed reality. The prophetic texts describe a moment of direct divine intervention when the oppression of darkness reaches its zenith. It will be a moment preceded by unmistakable signs in the heavens and on earth. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly powers will be shaken. This apocalyptic language, whether interpreted literally or symbolically, conveys unprecedented cosmic upheaval. It is in this context that certain traditions await the return of a messianic figure, no longer in humility, as in the first coming described in the Gospels, but in power and glory visible to all. As it is written, "For as lightning cometh from the east and shines toward the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be." Matthew 24:27. This appearance will not be ambiguous. It will be unambiguous, universal, impossible to fake. The climax also involves a final battle. Apocalyptic texts speak of a place called Armageddon, where earthly forces will gather for definitive confrontation. But this conflict transcends conventional military battle. It is presented as a clash between spiritual realms that ultimately becomes manifest on the physical plane. Deception will be exposed, usurped power will be confronted, and legitimate sovereignty will be re-established. With regard to the Third Temple specifically, there are visions that suggest radical transformation of its function and meaning. What was built by human hands and desecrated by human pretension will, according to some interpretations, be replaced or transfigured by reality that transcends physical architecture. There are passages that speak of a new Jerusalem coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband, where there will be no need for a temple, because her temple is the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb. The prophetic climax also includes judgment, not vindictive or arbitrary, but as a cosmic final settlement where each one will receive according to their works. There are images of books being opened, of separation between sheep and goats, of chaff being separated from wheat. This judgment is not presented as an arbitrary surprise, but as confirmation of choices that each soul will have made during its earthly journey. The prophecies also speak of the resurrection of the dead at this culminating moment. Those who have slept through the ages will awaken, some to eternal life, others to eternal shame. This resurrection is not just restoration of the old body, but transformation into an existence that transcends limitations of flesh and blood. The righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. There are descriptions of cosmic renewal, new heavens and a new earth where justice will dwell, a world where death, mourning, crying and pain will no longer exist, where the first heaven and the first earth will have passed away and all things will be made new. This renewal is not merely reform of what exists, but transformation so profound that old categories of understanding can barely contain it. In the context of this climax, the role of the temple becomes clear retrospectively. It was not an end in itself, but a symbol pointing to a greater reality. Its construction and subsequent desecration serve as catalysts for events that will reveal fundamental spiritual truths and force definitive choices. Certain traditions teach that after these events, there will be a millennial kingdom, 1,000 years of peace where the Messiah will reign from Jerusalem. During this period, some interpret that there will be a final temple of unprecedented glory where nations will rise annually to worship. Others see the millennium symbolically representing the church age between two comings. Interpretations vary, but the common element is the expectation of establishing divine order that will starkly contrast with failed human systems. The prophetic climax is also a moment of reconciliation. There are promises that former enemies will become friends, that swords will be beaten into plowshares, that the lion will lie down with the lamb. This reconciliation is not just between humans, but between humanity and divinity, between creation and creator, between what is and what should be. But perhaps the most profound element of the prophetic climax is the promise of presence. The entire drama of the Third Temple, its construction, desecration, and eventual obsolescence, points to a fundamental human longing to dwell in the presence of the divine. And the final promise is that this presence will not be mediated by buildings, rituals, or human priests, but will be direct, immediate, and eternal. As a voice from heaven proclaims, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them." If you want to continue exploring the mysteries that connect ancient promises to eternal hopes, subscribe and stay with us on this journey of revelation. The repercussions of the events associated with the Third Temple extend far beyond the historical moment of its construction or destruction. They reverberate through individual consciousnesses, faith communities, and the very fabric of reality as we know it. For those who lived through the period described in the prophecies, the consequences will be immediate and transformative. There are texts that speak of survivors who will pass into a renewed era, carrying memories of what they passed through, but now inhabiting a radically different reality. These will be living witnesses of the transition between eras, bridges between the world that was and the world that will be. The most profound consequence, according to the prophecies, is the definitive establishment of justice and righteousness. Systems that oppressed will be dismantled. Lies that deceived multitudes will be exposed to the unforgiving light of truth. What was done in secret will be proclaimed from the housetops. This total revelation will create a reality where deception can no longer thrive. There are also consequences for religious structures. Many traditions that have developed through centuries of waiting will face radical reassessment. Interpretations that seemed right may turn out to be incomplete or incorrect. Practices that seemed essential may prove to be transitory. This purification through revelation will be painful but necessary. For the temple concept specifically, the consequences are paradoxical. The physical building that so many expected, built, and then desecrated will have served its purpose precisely because of its inadequacy. By demonstrating that no human structure can contain the divine, that no building of stone can replace transformed hearts, the third temple will fulfill a profound pedagogical function even through its failure. The consequences also include reconciliation between groups that have been separated for centuries. There are prophecies about the end of ancient enmities, about walls of separation being torn down, about two becoming one. This unification will not come through real commitment, but through revelation that dispels misunderstandings and exposes common roots deeper than superficial divisions. Economically and politically, the consequences involve complete restructuring. Systems based on the accumulation of wealth, on power over others, on the exploitation of the vulnerable, all of these will be rendered obsolete. An economy of sufficiency will replace one of greed. Governance will be based on service, not domination. These changes will not be gradual or negotiated. They will be imposed by the new reality ushered in by climate events. There are also consequences for the natural world. The prophecies speak of the land that will produce abundantly without the need for strenuous effort, of predators that will lose their ferocity, of the entire creation being freed from servitude to corruption. This ecological renewal is not merely symbolic. It represents restoration of the harmony between humanity and the environment that has been broken since time immemorial. For individuals, the consequences are both challenging and liberating. Each person will have to confront their choices, their loyalties, their deepest motivations. But for those who emerge from this confrontation with integrity intact, unprecedented freedom of conscience awaits. The ability to live without the burden of guilt, without fear of condemnation, in restored relationship with the divine. The consequences also include the transmission of knowledge to future generations. There will be a need to tell the story, what the ancient world was like, what happened during the Great Transition, why certain choices were crucial. This narrative will serve as a warning and inspiration to those who will be born into the new era, ensuring that hard-learned lessons are not forgotten. There are consequences for concepts of time and eternity. The era inaugurated after the events of the Third Temple is described as having a different quality, no longer subject to decline and death, no longer marked by a succession of generations where each one must rediscover truths that the previous one knew. It will be time that participates in eternity in a way that our current understanding can barely imagine. The prophecies also speak of consequences for invisible spiritual dimensions. Forces that operated in the shadows will be imprisoned. Accusers who brought conviction will be silenced. The spiritual atmosphere of reality will be purified, allowing communion with the divine without the interference and distortions that characterized the ancient era. For many living today, contemplating these future consequences influences present choices. The expectation of a final reckoning encourages integrity now. The hope of coming renewal sustains perseverance in the midst of current difficulties. The belief that injustices will be righted provides comfort to those who suffer seemingly endless oppression. But the consequences also include burden of responsibility. If these prophecies are true, then every present choice carries eternal weight. Comfortable neutrality becomes impossible. The demand for definitive positioning creates tension that some find intolerable, preferring not to think about the prophetic future and focus only on the immediate present. The final consequences of the Third Temple, therefore, are not merely historical or theological. They are simultaneously deeply personal and universal. They touch every aspect of existence, from the cosmically all-encompassing to the intimately individual. And regardless of how we interpret the specifics of the prophecies, they confront us with fundamental questions about the meaning, purpose and destiny of the human journey through time. Reflect and share. If we knew for sure what a great transformation awaits us, how would that change our priorities and choices today? We have reached the end of this journey through millennia of hope, prophecy, and expectation, centered on a building that does not yet exist, and that may never exist in the way many imagine. But along this path, we discover that the real question was never about stones and mortar, but about what they symbolize: the human longing for divine presence, for restored order, for an encounter between heaven and earth. The narrative of the Third Temple reveals itself to be much more than architectural speculation or eschatological calculation. It is a mirror that reflects our deepest hopes and our darkest fears. It is a lens through which generations have interpreted their present and imagined their future. It is such a potent symbol that it transcends its literal references to touch something primordial in human consciousness. We walk through the history of the two previous temples, witnessing glory and destruction, construction and exile. We explore prophecies that span cultures and eras, each adding texture to the mystery. We confront the tension between hope of restoration and warning of deception. We contemplate visions of worlds in ruins and promises of cosmic renewal. And through it all, one truth has remained constant: the human thirst for something beyond itself, for connection with the eternal, for meaning that transcends the ephemeral. Scripture reminds us, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you?" 1 Corinthians 3:16. This truth, proclaimed 2,000 years ago, continues to echo through the centuries. Perhaps the true Third Temple is not a building awaiting stones and gold, but a transformation awaiting willing hearts. Perhaps the presence that so many seek in holy places is already available in inner places, if we would only learn to recognize it. But this does not diminish the power of the prophecies about the physical temple. They stand as reminders that human history is not circular but directional, not meaningless but teleological, not abandoned but observed by eyes that see beyond the visible. Whether fulfilled literally or symbolically, these prophecies point to truths that transcend their specific form of manifestation. On this journey, we encounter more questions than answers, and perhaps that is precisely how it should be. Mystery is not the enemy of faith, but its companion. The humility of admitting that we do not understand everything is not weakness, but wisdom, and the willingness to live with tension between prophetic hope and present responsibility is not a contradiction, but spiritual maturity. For those who await the Third Temple as a literal fulfillment of ancestral promises, may this hope strengthen your faith and refine your devotion. For those who see in these prophecies symbolic language pointing to spiritual realities, may this perspective deepen your perception of the divine working through history. And for those still searching, may this mystery invite you to explore more deeply the fundamental questions that define human existence. Thank you for walking with us, ESCO, through this complex tapestry of history, prophecy, and hope. For allowing us to explore together territories where certainty is rare and where faith, reason, and imagination must collaborate to create understanding. For keeping an open mind and heart even when faced with challenging ideas or unsettling visions of what might lie ahead. The history of the Third Temple, far from being complete, continues to be written. Each generation adds its chapter, interprets the signs of its time, seeks to discern whether it is experiencing prelude or epilogue, dawn or twilight, and perhaps this ongoing search, this generational engagement with mystery and promise, is part of the purpose itself, to keep us alert, vigilant, aware that there is more at stake than the mundane everyday suggests. May the mysteries explored here not end as mere information, but transform into contemplation. May ancient prophecies not just be relics of the past, but compasses for the present. May the hope symbolized by the third temple, whatever its ultimate form, inspire us to build, here and now, lives that reflect the values of the kingdom we await. Stay connected with us as we continue exploring the mysteries that lie between the visible and the invisible, between the temporal and the eternal, between what has been promised and what still awaits fulfillment.